Welcome to Friendeavor, the podcast, the weekly podcast where we explore the highs and lows of friendship with your hosts, Danielle and Kayla.
As we journey through life, our friendships often evolve and change, ebb and flow, and sometimes even come to an end. Danielle and I are lifelong advocates for the power of friendship, and we are here to guide all of us through the many challenges and joys that come with building and maintaining strong, meaningful connections with those around us.
Join us each week as we deep dive into the intricacies of friendship, from navigating conflicts to fostering new relationships and everything in between. With insightful interviews, personal anecdotes, and expert advice, Friendeavor is the perfect podcast for anyone looking to strengthen their bonds with the people they love.
So, whether you are on the go, taking care of chores, or just settling in, get ready to explore the world of friendship on Friendeavor, the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Friendeavor, the podcast. I'm your host, Danielle.
And I'm Kayla. Hey, everyone.
And we are thrilled that you have decided to join us this week for episode 28. It's a little bit of a Debbie Downer one. I'm going to be honest. It is when to let go. Tips and tricks for knowing when it's time that a friendship is just not healthy anymore.
Right. And it is a Debbie Downer, but it's something that everyone is going to have to do at some point. I mean, I think so. Everyone.
Yeah.
And it's something that you're going to have to learn to do in a Christian manner.
Yeah.
And also in a way that's not toxic.
Right. You don't start any relationship ready and waiting for it to, you don't plan on it ending, right?
Right.
When you start it.
Yeah.
But the worst thing is to be caught unawares on how to deal with it after the end is come, And so it's like, again, we don't want to have to tell you guys how to navigate a broken friendship, but this is how you know when it's time to let go.
Yeah.
So let's kick it off with your first clue. And none of these are probably going to be rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hear this episode and you're like, oh my, I am a multiple of these things. I'm not saying that this is your sign to cut it off, but look into it, see if your relationship is healthy, if it's growing,
right?
That kind of thing. So number one, consistently negative impact. If the friendship consistently brings more negativity than positivity into your life, more stagnation than growth, you got constant arguments, drama, you're feeling drained after you spend time together, it might be time to reevaluate its worth in your life.
Right. Feeling drained after spending time together is a big one. It doesn't necessarily mean you spent the entire time arguing, but maybe it's just a person where you feel like you have to walk on eggshells around them and
be on your guard.
Right. You have your guard up the entire time you're around them. And then, right, it's more negative than positive. Can I throw you a curveball?
Yeah.
Curveball. Okay. And I'm genuinely wondering for myself, when is it a good time to let go if it's more of a, I don't want to say ministry, but if the person needs your friendship more than you need theirs, and you're they're lower on options than you. And so it's, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. You're almost doing a service to this person.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
I would say it fits the same mold. If it is regularly, consistently, negatively impacting you and your other relationships, I mean, you can try reducing your time with them at first.
Yeah.
But after a while, it's the same thing. Like, if it's not healthy, it's not healthy. I don't care if it's a friendship out of childhood, a ministerial friendship, one of, convenience. Some, like we talked about how relationships are, the way people get into certain tiers are time spent. So sometimes you spend time with people just because you work with them.
Yeah.
And so therefore they're more your friend. Now you can't quit your job to get out of that relationship, obviously. But I think it's the same standard as if it's negatively impacting you. And if you're married, impacting your marriage, nothing is worth that.
No.
And so, I would say the same thing. Even it doesn't matter what level. If it's a consistent negative impact, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Which brings up an interesting point, because ministerial friendships is not something that we've talked about, but we should explore that. But the next level of, or the next consideration of knowing when to let go is lack of reciprocity. So ministerial friendships, you are typically, there is no take. It is only give, 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 give.
Right.
So I wouldn't say every single one of these is a trigger for knowing when to let go. But the I cannot speak. Consistently negative one is definitely one to consider. This one, lack of reciprocity, is not one I would consider, because you kind of know what you're signing up for in a ministerial friendship, or a mentor friendship, whatever you want to call it, if it's not straight ministry. But in your standard, normal, if you will, friendships, it's a two-way street. We did an entire episode on this. It was one of our highest listened to episodes. So that makes me think that people were looking for, am I taking and giving? Am I giving and taking? It's a two-way street. If you find yourself always giving and not receiving the same level of support or care, or effort in return, it could very well be an indication that the friendship is imbalanced at best.
Right.
But leaning toward the point of unsustainable. You get this in people who constantly have negativity in their lives, and so they need, well, they say they need to, but they take because oh, my family's going through a hard time, oh, my job is really tough, or whatever. And that's totally fine. Life is life. You are never gonna have just a perfect, pleasant, I mean, the richest person in the world does not have a perfect life.
Yeah. Right.
So whatever your highest desire is, even when you have that full fulfillment, you are still not going to have a perfect life. So learning how to balance your negativity or your issues, if you will, with what your friend has going on too. Like if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh wow, I do have terrible stuff that happens in my life often, but am I also taking the time to make sure that my friend is okay?
Right.
Because it's giving and it's taking.
And there will be seasons when, like, often when you guys hang out in that month or so, you're mostly talking about the hard time this one friend is going through. And yeah, there will be seasons, but don't let it become permanent. Definitely.
A while back, there was a situation where it was so complex that my family and I were talking about it every single day. And it's because it was multi-layered. And, you know, we all needed to suss it out and wondering, you know, whatever was going on. But that was a season that we're in.
Yeah.
And so if I took that, say, you know, I don't remember the time frame of that, but it was a while back. If I took that complexity and brought it with me for the rest of my life, that season would never end.
Right.
And it would affect me all the time. I mean, you gotta be able to navigate the seasons, and you as the friend, if you're the one who does not have the negativity issues, you have to be okay with those seasons. But if it becomes the point where it's unhealthy,
right,
that's when you know when it's time to let go. And I even stress, and I did an episode on this on YouTube as well, about this is when you've done all that you can.
Right.
These are not like, oh, things are difficult, so it's time to let go.
You don't kick people to the curb as soon as they inconvenience you.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is ongoing stressors, lack of care, lack of love, negativity. This is a long road of this. This is not like, okay, we're going through a rough patch, I'm done.
Right.
I want to stress that here early on in the episode, that these are not tips and tricks for you to be like, oh, wow, okay, well, you know, I'm done with this because it's been a month. This is possibly years. Yeah. Am I saying that you have to succumb to negative things for years? No, you don't have to, but you need to be extremely aware of what the consequence is of letting go.
Right.
Is there something that you're just being short-sighted and you don't know what's going to come down the road as an aftershock? Just be aware and just, know what you're getting out of. They usually say know what you're getting into, but now in this case, know what you're getting out of. Are you sacrificing years of support and love because of something that is just a season?
Some drama.
Yeah. So consistently negative, lack of reciprocity, those are two things that you'll know it's time to let go. However, number 3 is sometimes those seasons of life just force you to grow apart. And that's our third one, is growing apart. People change.
Yeah.
Growth happens. And sometimes friendships just naturally drift apart.
Right.
And it's really heartbreaking.
Right. And sometimes it'll be because you're unequally yoked. And sometimes it's just because of interests or distance.
Yeah.
Or factors that are not these big, negative, dramatic things. Just growing apart.
We did impact of, I think, life changes is what that episode was called.
Life transitions.
Life transitions. Those are huge factors in growing apart. Unfortunately, sometimes people's values change. What they believe changes, and that's going to force you to grow apart.
Right.
They think that they're growing up and growing out, but they're not. They're just they're just taking a trip down the wrong path. Yeah. And hopefully that's just a trip and not a destination, and then they come back to what they believe. Yeah. But in the process, you're growing apart.
Yeah.
And I think back to a time where a friend we were growing apart, and it was drastic and it was sudden because of changes that she had made. And I talked to her later, and she's like, oh yeah, I was really sad the way that you just ended our friendship because you wouldn't reach out. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Two-way street.
Two-way street. I did not reach out to you. You did not reach out to me. Also, I'm not the one who made the decisions that were made. So we got over it and we healed and all that stuff. But she came back to what she knew. But the growing apart factor was just a change of values. Okay. And if you are the person who thinks that the other person is growing apart, take a look at yourself. Have you changed? Have you changed negatively? Are you the one who is the person forcing the growth apart because of changing values? Self-awareness is so important in friendship. It is so important.
In every facet of life.
We could do a whole series of episodes on self-awareness and what it means in your life. But before you start pointing fingers at other people, and before you start pointing at factors of, oh, it's time to let go because they did this. Well, hold on. What did you do?
Right.
What can you do to fix this before it is time to let go?
Right.
Then we get into areas which are, it's kind of abused today, but man, it's so true, is toxic behaviors.
Yes.
That will ruin a friendship faster than anything I've ever seen.
And it's thrown around. That term is thrown around pretty loosely.
Yeah, it's abused, I would say. But
it exists. It's a real thing, but it is abused. Yes.
Yeah. So toxic behaviors are often looked at these days as like disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
Trying to help you. Like, oh, that's not toxic. No. Toxic behaviors are manipulation.
Yeah.
Pure disrespect. Not just like, oh, they disrespected me. Not like the sassy, like, oh, they don't like what I like or whatever. No. Disrespect is in like truly dishonoring you. Yeah. Boundary violation. Yeah. Repeated boundary. I would stop and say repeated boundary violation, because if someone crosses your boundary one time, that is not worth.
Yeah, we're not going to label them as toxic.
Yeah, that's not worth labeling them as toxic or immediately cutting them off. Like it should be a repeated offense, because that's also showing a pattern of disrespect that they don't care about your boundary.
Right. Especially if you've communicated it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, we've talked about this before, but the communication aspect, they're not going to know. They can't read your mind. Like we talked about a couple weeks ago. They can't read your mind about your boundaries. You got to set the boundaries. And if it's a repeated offense, well, that's toxic. That's a toxic behavior. And it's essential to recognize that those behaviors, manipulation, all this stuff are harmful. And they are not going to be conducive to a healthy relationship.
So the next one is repeated betrayals or trust issues. So, I mean, any friendship platform is going to tell you this. Trust is a fundamental aspect of any friendship, relationship, whether it's in business or romantic or friendship, any relationship. Trust is going to be the fundamental. And repeated betrayals or breaches of trust can severely undermine the foundation of the relationship.
The foundation on which it is built.
Yes. Yeah. So if trust issues persist despite your repeated attempts to address them, so if you, and that's a key, you have to address them, then that's going to be a challenge to maintain a healthy relationship.
I think that another word that is abused is betrayal. Betray is such a weighty thing. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even saying that someone broke your trust is a weighty thing, but Judas betrayed Jesus.
Yes.
So let's look at that. What does that mean? Just using a biblical example, he went against everything that he'd been taught by Jesus.
Yeah.
He actively chose to thwart his plan of his ministry, right?
Yeah.
So think of these action terms: thwart, like actively thwart, go against, the verbs, the actions, and then betray, as in turn him over to someone who wanted to harm him.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so if someone betrayed you by telling your parents that you snuck out,
That's not betrayal.
that's not betrayal. That's not betrayal.
That's your best interest.
That's someone trying to help you. I mean, if they're
Yeah.
trying to get you in trouble, I wouldn't say it's in your best interest, but yet, even if they didn't intend it to be in your best interest, yet it is still. I think of a story of a girl who snuck out of her friend's house, and I don't think they ever got caught by the parents. Like, someone found out and then reported it to the parents. But you know what? If they had kept that path and all the action they had done that night when they snuck out, they would probably be in jail.
Yeah.
So it was an extremely difficult situation when it came out, but thank God it came out. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, and you know, they live healthy, happy lives now. And I'm not saying that that's exact causation, the correlation, but it just is an example of someone who thought that they had been betrayed because someone told on them, but that's not what that was.
Yeah.
So again, Judas actively thwarted the ministry, turned him over to people who wanted to harm him, went against everything he believed.
Yeah.
Betrayal.
Yeah, that's betrayal.
As humans, we are constantly, whether we know it or not, looking for fulfillment. If you are constantly being let down and feeling unfulfilled in that friendship, and that kind of goes back to the negativity, if you're feeling drained, if you're feeling like it has no purpose, because even like goofy fun friendships have a purpose.
Yeah.
It's to be goofy and fun. It's to bring that light and positivity into your life. If you consistently feel unfulfilled or dissatisfied with the friendship, despite efforts to improve it, there's that key again. You got to try. That could be a sign that it's time to let go.
Yeah.
That the relationship
true.
has run its course, because it's not serving any impact to your life or any positive impact to your life.
Right.
I talked to a very smart guy the other day. He and my dad and I went out to lunch, and he was talking. I mean, he just speaks and like wisdom comes out, and it was just crazy just to sit and listen to him. But he was talking about that when people feel unfulfilled, they go to distraction. When they're not in the stage of development, they automatically move into distraction. It's not a active choice. It's a like physiological, biological thing. When they're not being developed, when they're not being fulfilled, they move into distraction. Your friendship can become a distraction from you being fulfilled in your life.
Yeah.
Not just in your friendship, but in your ministry, in your calling, your purpose, your work, whatever you've set your hand to do it with all your might. And if that friendship is now just a distraction, it's not actually the fun, goofy positivity, providing positivity. It's just a distraction from whatever you need to be doing with your life.
Right. Wow.
You are unfulfilled, and it could be time to let go.
Wow. That's good. And we see that pretty often these days.
Yeah.
Of people who, and I'm not, against hanging out with your friend every day, but if there is no evidence of growth anywhere else in your life,
right,
and you are hanging out with friends every single day, that's indicative of something.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point, because I went through a window. When you're a teenager, you get to do all kinds of teenagery stuff, and it's awesome, and you're living your life, especially when you're in that window right after high school where you don't quite have responsibilities yet.
Right between 16 and 18, because you can drive, you have your license, but you don't got bills. It's just, that's
maybe even 16 and 20, honestly, because there's like this, I wouldn't call it a sweet spot, because life is sweet. I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, those are the days that you
glory days.
If you miss those, you miss them. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But where if you are hanging out with your friends every day, make sure you're building something together that's going to last. The girls that I hung out, you know, if not every day, very close to every day, we're still best friends right now.
Yeah.
Because we were building something. It wasn't just a distraction. It wasn't just avoiding something that we need to be doing. We were growing together in ways that we didn't even recognize then.
And now that you're all adults and establishing your careers and your ministries and everything, you guys are not able to hang out as much, but you have that foundation.
Absolutely.
And you started building it in a healthy way when you were 16 to 20.
Yeah.
Which is a lesson to be learned.
And a lot of people ask us, the four of us, you know, or maybe not straight up ask, but they allude to like, I wish I had what you had, you know, oh, like my friends were not like that close or whatever. And I always like, you know, it took time and whatever. But then it comes back to, well, I've been friends with these people since childhood, and I'm not as close to them as you guys are. Well, that sweet spot really is sweet, because you should be past your drama tween stage at that point.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be competing with each other. You know, and so when I say sweet spot, we had the benefit of, and this sounds strange to say it's a benefit, but of not knowing each other when we were kids. We didn't have any ought against each other from when we were, what they did in Sunday school or whatever.
Right.
And I honestly think it's such a God orchestrated thing. It's not something that any person, I think, can manufacture on their own. You can, you know, strive to build friendships, absolutely. But for us, it was just like the perfect mesh of timing of our ages and of where our stages of life are. Now that might seem like the same thing, but it's not to me. Someone else could think it's the same thing, but to me it's not, because my family moved here, so our stage of life was a transition of learning a new environment. What do you do when you're in a new environment? You feel alone. And so when you are, you know, connecting with certain people, it can still feel like just an outsider. And so with us, with that perfect age, you know, window, and Kara was 14, you know, she wasn't like in that quote unquote sweet spot, but Lydia and I were, so we could drive us to places, and we could, you know, we were in high school. Well, Lydia had graduated, but I was close to graduating, and that foundation that we built, we were all pretty much in the same phase of life, and, you know, it just worked. And so everything we built there was super fulfilling. Yeah. And it continues to fulfill 10 years later, 11 years later, which leads me to my next notion of when you might realize it's time to let go, is unresolved conflict. If you've tried to overcome a conflict in your life with a friend and you can't get past it, there's always a hang up. There's always someone who just can't let go of it. That might be an indication that it's time to let go of the conflict, because conflict or it might be time to let go of the friendship, because conflict, that's normal. That's a normal part of any relationship. Right. But when it's ongoing or it's patterns of hurtful behavior and it's not addressed, it's kind of like the thing we talked about, you know, manipulative and toxic behavior and all that stuff.
That kind of all of what we just talked about falls under unresolved conflict if it's repeated.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just that irreparable damage can be done. And if it's kind of like there's always kind of like a straw that breaks the camel's back. You know, and it could be something that's like innocuous. It's like, that's what did it. That's what ended the friendship. Okay. No. That's not what ended it. That's what was the final thing that happened. Yeah. There were patterns of disrespect and gossiping to other people and taking advantage of the person that you didn't see. You as an outsider did not see that. but the person in the friendship saw the pattern over and over and over and over. And then finally it was just, that's it.
Yep.
I'm done. I ain't messing with this anymore.
Yeah.
They chose to treat me this way. Therefore, it's over.
Right.
It's over.
And you have to realize too, because I've heard people say like, well, I don't have very many friends. And so I got to take what I can get, essentially. Mm-hmm. And you have to realize like there are, I mean, I guess I'll be mainstream, but there are other fish in the sea.
Right.
Not just romantically, just with friendships. You don't have to invest years and emotions and all this into a friendship that's not going to be fulfilling and that is toxic. All of what we just said. You have other options.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for people to recognize that if they don't have, maybe like a healthy upbringing or family, or they don't have a big youth group.
Yeah.
They tend to hold on to these kind of relationships, but you don't have to. And there are better relationships out there. I promise.
And it's also has a lot to do with the environment that you find yourself in.
Yeah.
If you're looking for friendships in toxic places, guess what? You're gonna get toxic relationships.
Right.
Ding, ding. I don't, like, that's just, it should be self-explanatory. I don't think it often is, but it should be. So yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
The last one, like, indicator that I think is the most important one, and that you should strive so diligently to have this tool in your belt, if you will, is, it's kind of like, I have two versions of it, but it's the same thing. It's a gut feeling, or what I would like to call a spiritual nudging. Intuition.
Yeah.
That is something that you should pray for.
Yes.
Pray for discernment. Discernment is a gift. It is literally a gift of the spirit. And so it's like, you need to pray to have that, because that is what's going to help you avoid so many situations where you have to know when it's time to let go.
Yeah.
Sometimes your intuition can just provide, not sometimes, all the time. Yeah. Your intuition can provide valuable insights into the health of that friendship. You might not even see it. You could just be going along, and then suddenly the Holy Ghost is like, hey, is that right? Is that
right?
And you didn't even see any other signs, but then it's like, oh,
right.
Something in my spirit did not agree with that.
And it could be after you're done hanging out. You could get home. If you feel icky, if you feel not just unfulfilled, but if you feel bad about the conversation that took place, or just, you don't have to be doing something sinful to feel bad.
Right.
If you just get home and you're like, that's something to pay attention to, especially if you're praying for that.
Yeah. And the spiritual nudging could also, it might not be so explicit to say, in that friendship, end it.
Yeah.
I would say most times it's not. It's
No.
going to give you signs.
Yeah.
To follow. What do signs do? They point you in a direction, right?
Right.
So if you're going down the road of friendship and a sign pops up and a nudging says, hey, check on that. Go this way instead. Or it could be saying, check what they're doing. What path are they going down? It looks like you guys are parallel, but even perpendicular lines come to a point at one point, And so even if one clicks off to 3 degrees to the left, it looks like you're going parallel for a long time, and so until suddenly you are not.
Yeah.
And you are on two completely different paths.
So true.
So the spiritual nudging, or if you want to call it a gut feeling, if you're not, spiritual or whatever, is a huge, huge thing that, like I said, I think that trumps all the rest of them.
Yeah.
Because that's the only one that is going to be one that there could be no signs.
Right.
Until there's that one.
Yeah. And it's really hard to misread your gut. Like even if you are not praying for a conviction, this is good advice either way, because after you're done hanging out with someone, or in the moment when you're hanging out with someone, if you feel gross about something, it's not very difficult to misread that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another aspect that you can consider too is if you are in a friendship with more than one person, so like a friend group or whatever, and you get that nudge, if there's someone who you think is, you know, I wouldn't say on the same spiritual level because that sounds snooty, but you feel in tune with in the spirit, and it's about the other person, you can check with them too. Check with spiritual leaders, counsel, people you trust, and be like, hey, I felt this. What does that mean?
Yes.
And they could be like, it's nothing. Or they could be like, yeah, you should explore that. Or I felt that too.
Yeah.
Parents sometimes pick up on the spiritual issues of friends before the kid ever does.
All the time with me.
All the time. And so your parents could be like, yeah, I don't like what she did or what she said or what he's wearing or whatever. And it's nothing against the person. Yeah. It's nothing to be like judgmental against them.
No.
You're not passing judgment on them. But if it comes down to you having a unfulfilled friendship or being saved.
Yeah. Right.
Well, guess which one matters. So those are our indicators, if you will, the signs for when it might be time to let go. And next week on Friendeavor the podcast, we're not just going to leave you hanging. We're not just going to say, yep, this is how you let go. No, next week we're going to be talking about how to cope with a loss of a friendship.
Because even though we talked about toxic behaviors and all these more negative than positive, you're still going to grieve that loss, especially if you spent a lot of time with the person.
And energy developing it.
Right. It's going to be a grieving process. So you'll want to know how to cope with the end of the friendship.
Yeah. And even if this is not a season that you're in, and we hope and pray that you never are, but it could be just a thing that, you know, you put in your back pocket for God forbid if the day should come. So
right.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week to our Debbie Downer episode of Friendeavor the podcast. When to know if it's time to let go. And we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Friendeavor the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's content, leave a review and share with a friend. You can find the show notes on our website, www.friendeavor.net, and in the description of this episode.
Friendship is a journey. It's an endeavor. We'll see you next time on Friendeavor.